Hi everybody, welcome back to another edition of Indycar on the 15th of July. I'm Gordon Ross and today I'm in a totally different place from my usual transmitting station position. So I'm going to try and defeat the UK government spooks who are trying to disrupt my broadcast. Anyway, today's programme we're looking at cricket, we're looking at the Royal Navy and we're looking at wind power. Three different things affecting three very different groups of people in the UK. At the moment, the last few days, you could be forgiven for thinking that the only thing that had ever happened in England was this cricket competition yesterday, which, by the way, congratulations to the English cricket team on an amazing victory, but also congratulations to an extremely strong New Zealand team who took it all the way to the very last ball in the decider. So a fantastic cricket game. I think everybody's saying it's probably the best game of cricket that's ever been played. So historical times for English cricket and wonderful for them. Not so interesting for those of you in Scotland who don't really care about cricket and never really got the game. But it's a sign of the times. England at the moment is desperate for something to feel happy about and cheerful about and feel a bit of pride in. And if cricket, which they invented after all, is the thing that gives them that happiness and that security, then terrific. That's good for them. But maybe they should stick to sports. Looking at the recent global events where the United Kingdom is involved, particularly in the Gulf of Oman, where a British oil tanker was being harassed by three small motorboats, probably armed with machine guns, and this would be the Iranian guards doing their thing. But the response to that was for a British destroyer to get between the tanker and these little gunboats and chase them away, which is exactly the kind of gunboat diplomacy that the UK used to be famous for. Except that you'll notice that despite this growing tension in the Gulf and the fact that oil tankers have been allegedly blown up by mines, some of them being harassed, some are being, some illegal tankers are being stopped, allegedly carrying oil from Iran to other places. Despite all of that, there is only one naval ship in the Gulf. But we heard yesterday that the Ministry of Defence is planning to send a second destroyer to the Gulf. And you think, well, wonderful, that's going to mean there's two destroyers there, twice the cover. But now we discovered that the ship that's already out there is actually due to return to port. It has to come back to port for refuelling, refitting and repairs, and therefore it was already scheduled to come back. So though it looked very much like they're strengthening the little flotilla out in the Gulf of Oman, in actual fact they're just replacing one ship with another, which begs the question, why is the Royal Navy so weak and why are there so few ships? So few ships, in fact, that one admiral commented last week that there may not be enough ships in the fleet which are actually in action, not in port, getting repaired or being dismantled or being refitted. There might not be enough ships actually in the water at the moment to patrol the waters around the United Kingdom, the job for which they are trained and equipped, the job which the Royal Navy is supposed to do, to defend the UK. This is the same situation that the UK found itself in just before the Falklands War started. The naval budget had been hacked to bits by a Tory government. There had been a massive reining in of spending. There had been a cancellation of all kinds of contracts that had been placed for new equipment, new jets, new planes, new ships. All of that was swept away under Margaret Thatcher's regime. And look what happened there. We ended up with no naval force to speak of to send to the Falkland Islands, and instead of which they had to bring people out of retirement to fly planes that really were designed for the 1950s in order to take a bomb load down to Port Stanley and drop it on the airfield. We are in the same situation now. Britain has a very weak navy at the moment, and it is chronically short of manpower in general for its armed forces, and yet it continues to try and promote itself as a world player, a country which can take its power across the world at any time it wants with its huge aircraft carriers. But you'll note that one of its aircraft carriers, which was heading to do some trials over near the United States, had to turn back. just because of this spat between Donald Trump and the United Kingdom over the ambassador's comments. So the whole of the British Navy can be turned around just because Donald Trump has a bit of a hissy fit because there's a leak of some embarrassing comments. So it's not really much of a defensive force, really, when you look at it in these terms. Now, broadly speaking, the UK has a fairly robust defensive system, usually, but it's becoming weaker, and the manning levels have dropped. The standing army is now less than 80,000, I understand, with most of the army now being made up of reservists. There are actually now slightly more reservists than there are full-time soldiers. So we've got a part-time army and a full-time army making up the entire army, and that's probably as small as it's ever been. And I wonder actually whether there is any real reason for having such large armed forces anymore. Britain, in theory at least, does not have any real enemies. I mean, the Russians will fly over every now and again and test the edges of our air defences, and they've done that for decades. We do the same thing. We fly over the Gulf, or we fly over the eastern edge of Europe to test Russia's defences. These are things that people do all the time. But do we really need such a big defensive force? Would it not perhaps be better for England to demonstrate its international prowess on the sports field, because it's good at that, and it would give England something to cheer about when there's not very much going for it at the moment because of Brexit. Now that brings me to the question of Brexit as well. Brexit sort of is factored into this programme as well a little bit, and there is still this chance just now that Boris Johnson, when he is chosen, because he's not really being elected, he's been picked by a bunch of elderly people in the south of England, but when he is selected and he becomes Prime Minister and he forms his cabinet and he is making plans for what to do, you know that Boris Johnson is so cowardly that he will avoid answering awkward questions, and probably will avoid making any contentious decisions, to the point where I think he will probably call a general election in order to get his no-deal Brexit through. He'll make that what the general election is about. And we know from the polls, current polls, from just about every newspaper, that the Tories would lose the general election to Corbyn's Labour. And we also know that the Scottish National Party would win almost every seat if there was a general election tomorrow. Somewhere in the region of 50 to 55 seats would fall to the SNP if there was a general election right now. So will Boris Johnson call a general election? And if so, what would the result be? Imagine if Boris Johnson said it's about no-deal Brexit. If you vote for the Tories, you get your Brexit. If you vote for Corbyn, you don't. It could come down to that, and it might be that the English people decide to throw the lot in with Boris and go for the no-deal Brexit, because that's the way it's going at the moment anyway. The Europeans have said again that they're not going to renegotiate the deal, and there is no way that Boris Johnson is any kind of negotiator. Even Donald Trump would be a better negotiator than Boris Johnson. So anyway, the situation at the moment is England is in a very weak position when it comes to dictating anything to anybody outside of these shores. So perhaps they should haul in the reins, reduce the size of their armed forces, spend a bit more money on helping the poor and providing employment, getting something done about the NHS, increasing police numbers, instead of wasting all this dosh on aircraft carriers and the world's most expensive jet fighters, which they have bought from the United States in a deal. We are always, it seems, at the beck and call of the United States, and it's always the United States that benefits from the special arrangement. It's never us. We end up being the tail of the dog. We get wagged, we get told what to do and which way to go. Anyways, there is some good news for us, and that is that it's been revealed today, actually, that the Scottish wind power industry has been so successful that this year alone, in the first half of the year, the wind industry in Scotland manufactured enough power to power the entire country, and a bit more, and another 88% on top of that, which has gone to powering the north of England, which, like the rest of England, is struggling at the moment to get enough electrical power because they haven't invested as quickly or as well in their own indigenous wind and maybe tide and offshore energy industries. So England's still lagging behind. Scotland way ahead in the lead in terms of renewable energy. We are burning at full blast at the moment. Scotland is going full steam ahead on renewable energy. We are so far ahead of England, it's unbelievable. So there's a lot for us to be happy about. And there's never been a better time to be Scottish than now, because the potential we have at this moment in time is enormous. Imagine this is just the beginning of the renewable energy revolution in Scotland. This is the start of it. This isn't the end of it. This is the first baby steps at generating electricity and exporting it properly for the first time. And when 88% on top of what you're already generating for your own country, and when you've got this other 88% energy going abroad, that's money coming into the Scottish economy. And that money will keep coming in long after Scotland has withdrawn itself from the UK, which I undoubtedly think it is going to do this year, because everything is pulling that way. England is pulling away towards Brexit, Scotland is pulling away towards independence and sticking with its European marketplace. The Europeans have shown the confidence in Scotland by keeping their offices in Edinburgh open despite Brexit, despite the threats to Scottish sovereignty, despite the threats to Hollywood. You'll also have heard that the new Mundell Palace in Waverley Place has now been named the Queen Elizabeth Hub or something like that. As if that makes any difference at all to anyone in Scotland, that the hub is called after the English Queen. I don't really see the point in all those naming buildings after the Queen. I mean, we've got a hospital in Glasgow that's named the Queen Elizabeth II University Hospital, and that comes out as the Curia when you try and say it. It's a horrible name. I prefer that called the Southern General. It's easier to say and everybody still remembers that. But there's this thing we've got to have named after the English Queen. We've got to have Union Jacks plastered all over it. And by the way, it's not only one hub that's being built, it's two. There's another one planned for Glasgow. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, Mundell's plans have jumped, and there's another hub to be built in Glasgow soon. This is something which hasn't been mentioned too much in the press. It has appeared a little bit in the National today. So definitely the Tories are preparing a coup. They're preparing to take over Scotland as soon as they can after Brexit. Mundell is waiting in the wings, his wee jowls flapping, he's ready to go. And he's got his new hub and his 3,000 civil servants, plus the ones he poached from the Scottish Government as well, all ready to go. It all looks lovely and shiny and wonderful. But really, what is it? It's the English Embassy in Scotland, because that's what it's going to become. After we are independent, that building, with its 3,000 civil servants, it's just going to become the English Embassy, and all those 3,000 civil servants will have to find jobs back in England, because they're not going to be able to find work in Scotland, because A, we've already got a civil service at Holyrood, we don't need another one, and B, well, they're not needed up here really, are they? So why not send them all back to England or relocate them down there? But whatever happens, I'm fairly relaxed about it. Now that we know what it is, and we know they're planning another one in Glasgow as well, they have much bigger plans for dominating Scotland than I thought. But it makes sense, because Glasgow is really the manufacturing and business hub of Scotland, whereas Edinburgh is more the financial, legal and the capital of the country. Glasgow is still really much the engineering centre of Scotland, Glasgow and the Central Belt. Anyway, that's about it for today. But just remember, we are the most powerful country in the United Kingdom at the moment when it comes to energy. And that energy is something that we will be selling to the English market after we're independent. So if they want some cheap energy, renewable energy, and quickly, then they only have to ask. But we'll give them it at a fair price. But we won't be paying the huge transmission charges that they're currently charging Scottish power producers to transport those electrons to England. Electrons flow down cables without any cost. It's not like you have to hire a truck and carry them down to London. Those electrons just flow through the cables by themselves. They don't need to be paid for in any way. It may be a small charge to connect to their network, but other than that, really, it's money for nothing. Okay, I'm off. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great day. Remember, Scotland's now electrically the most powerful country in the UK. And England is probably going to be the cricket capital of the universe for the next century. And you're not going to hear anything about anything else other than England won another World Cup for the next few days. So be prepared, plug your ears, or switch your television set off, or watch Netflix. But if you don't like cricket and you don't want to hear the words World Cup winning England, then I would switch over. I'll see you all later. Have a great day. Bye bye.